This message has no affiliation with the Department of War. Good evening, everyone. Stick with us today as we go over climate change, the economic blackout, and answer one of your questions that you all asked during this week. This is the Martin Memo. The Martin Memo. All right, well, first of all, I just had to say what another great week here at the Martin Memo. We are up to, as of a few minutes ago, 426 subscribers. So keep it coming. Please reach out, support this channel. We need everything that we can get. This momentum is all thanks to you, and this movement is only growing. So please continue to support, and thank you so much for those of you out there tuning in and for making a difference within this podcast. Today we're going to go over something that the legacy networks won't. We're going to talk about pollution from a conservative, Republican, American first perspective. No hysteria, no guilt trips, just facts, incentives, and solutions that don't require surrendering our sovereignty or our paychecks. Because let's be clear, this isn't about doomsday prophecies. It's about clean air, clean water, and keeping our kids healthy without killing American jobs. So let's start with what we're up against. Every few years, the same script rolls out. A UN report draws with the scariest possible modeling assumptions about pollution levels. Teenagers get dragged in front of Congress to lecture adults. The media runs the same 5 seconds of a polar bear on a shrinking iceberg. Then the solution is always the same. Give more money to the same people who can't balance a budget or secure a border. But here's what they don't tell you. The IPCC, also known as the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, in their worst case scenario, say that there would be a 4 to 5 degrees Celsius warming by 2100 from unchecked pollution. This is also the same assumption that the world goes back to using 19th century coal technology and explodes population growth in the poorest countries. So it's really not accurate. This scenario is called Representative Concentration Pathway 8.5, also known as RCP 8.5, and even many mainstream scientists now admit that it is implausible. Yet that's the scenario that they use to peddle their narrative and call it science to justify the Green New Deal. Meanwhile, the moderate scenarios, the ones assuming that you use the same tech progress and some pollution pricing, show manageable warming between 1 and 2 degrees by 2100, which is not civilization ending as we know. But here's the good news, and it's a game changer for conservatives. The polls are shifting in our direction. Americans are waking up to pollution as a real here and now problem, not some fuzzy future apocalypse. And the best part, even Republicans are leading the charge on practical fixes. If you look at the latest data, Gallup poll from earlier this year shows a record high 48% of Americans now call global warming, or what we call unchecked pollution, a serious threat in their lifetime. That's up from 40% a few years back. And get this, 62% of the U.S. blame recent hurricanes on pollution-driven weather patterns, even without a single U.S. landfall this year. So why are Americans waking up to it now? Maybe it's the floods in the heartlands or the wildfires out west. A University of Chicago poll out this fall found 73% of Americans acknowledge warming and 60% link it to human pollution. Even among Republicans, concern is up. Only 31% see it as a personal threat, but that's still a jump from last year. And younger Republicans under 45, 42% of them now believe human pollution is the main driver, double what it was in 2017. This isn't liberal panic, it's common sense conservatism. Folks in flyover countries are tired of breathing smog from old coal plants or watching their farms drowned in polluted runoff. It's no wonder energy and pollution policy now ranks as very important to half of Americans, which is now neck and neck with immigration. It is time to own the narrative. So what do Republicans actually believe about pollution? Let me give you the red state consensus in plain English. The first point is pollution from human activity is warming the planet, about 1.1 degrees Celsius since the late 19th century. Point number 2, human activity is a contributing factor, but some may argue how much. Scientists will say 50 to 100%, and I would agree it's somewhere within that range. Extreme weather events are real, but the data does not show hurricanes, tornadoes, or wildfires are dramatically worse after you adjust for better detection and more people living in harm's way. Point number 4, adaptation. Seawalls, better forestry management, and a modernized grid is cheaper and more effective than trying to control the planet's thermostat from Washington, D.C. And most importantly, point 5, the best way to reduce pollution is American energy abundance and private sector innovation, not European-style centralized planning that makes energy expensive and life miserable. That is a contributing factor in why the EU is crumbling. Now let's talk numbers, the kind that show America's already leading on pollution without the nanny state nonsense. Let's start with CO2 pollution. The U.S. ranks second globally in total emissions at about 5 billion metric tons, which seems like a lot until you look at the number 1 spot, and that is China at 10 billion metric tons, which is twice as much as us. Since 2005, when China passed us as a top emitter, the U.S. CO2 has dropped by 17%. And what's China's? China's is up nearly 90%, and India has doubled. So while they get worse, how have we done better? Market forces. Natural gas from fracking slashed coal's electricity share from 50% to 20%, boosting efficiency without a single federal mandate. No pollution tax and no Paris Accord handcuffs. We ditched those. Trump got us out of that, remember? Solar and wind is now up to 13% of power, but they still need reliable backups like natural gas. And nuclear. Nuclear is the gold standard. We've talked about it many times on this podcast, how nuclear is the future. And in fact, recently, the Trump administration just granted $1 billion to go fix the plant at 3 Mile Isle, which is in Pennsylvania, and get that up and operational again. So this is great news. On that note, we do have to acknowledge that the Democrats actually tanked it in the 1970s, but conservatives are trying to revive it. But let's zoom out to the pollution that you can actually see and touch, and that is plastic and trash. Here's where the alarmists really miss the mark, and where America shines as a manager, not a waster. Globally, we are drowning in trash at 2.1 billion tons of municipal solid waste in 2023, which is headed to 3.8 billion by 2050, is what they estimate. Now, we have to acknowledge that the U.S., we generate the most per person with over 2,000 pounds annually, or 12% of the world's total from just 4% of the population. That's 239 million tons a year, which is enough to fill 822,000 Olympic swimming pools, which sounds bad, right? Well, that's not necessarily the case. Our infrastructure crushes it. We have a 35% recycling rate, which sounds bad, but that's actually better than most. And there is way less mismanaged waste leaking into the oceans and rivers compared to developing hotspots like coastal Asia or Africa, where poor systems send 80% of riverine plastic straight into the sea. With that being said, we do need to acknowledge that the recycling program within the U.S. is just not it, and I'm going to explain to you why. The national average cost to collect and process a ton of recyclables, $150 to $300 per ton. The market value of the sorted material is only $20 to $80 per ton. So that results in taxpayers having to foot the bill and cover that extra cost. In many red state cities like Houston, Phoenix, Jacksonville, they've already scaled back or canceled curbside because it is a money loser. Now let's actually get into what is recycled within the U.S. and if it is profitable. The only material that is profitable is aluminum, and I mean this on a mass scale basis. Aluminum. Aluminum gets about $1,500 per ton. The rest of it, from cardboard to bottles to plastics to glass, they don't make enough to justify for it. So now let's see what actually works within recycling. Deposit return systems work. In Michigan, it hits a 89 to 93% return rate on cans and bottles. Private sector runs it, consumers get 10 cents back, and there's no taxpayer subsidy. 10 red-leaning states already have them. What about waste-to-energy plants? 77 plants in the U.S. burn trash that can't be recycled, which generates electricity and reduces landfill volume by 90%. Florida gets 5% of its power this way. What about chemical recycling? Plants in Georgia, Ohio, and Texas are turning hard-to-recycle plastic back into oil or different types of plastic, which can be very profitable. And lastly, what about landfill mining? Companies now dig up old dumps, separate the metals and plastics, and landfill the rest in modern line cells. Private money with no mandates. These are real American solutions. Bottle deposits, burning trash for power, and new plants that turn plastic back into oil. Those work. Those make money and actually clean up the planet. That's the conservative way. Markets, innovation, and common sense, not feel-good mandates that just raise your trash bill. The bottom line being that the U.S. is the global champ at cutting emissions and managing waste while growing GDP 80% since 2005. In Europe, they de-industrialized and still lag. It is time to brag on that and not apologize. So if Republicans take the House, the Senate, and maybe the White House in 26 and 28, what should we actually do about this pollution crisis within America? Here's the Martin Memo 5-point plan to tackle pollution head-on. Point number 1, unleash American energy dominance. It is time to go back to being energy independent. We need permit reform, drill and frack where it is safe, build LNG export terminals so Europe isn't begging Putin for dirty gas, which is part of the reason that the war is still ongoing in Ukraine. Point 2, next-gen nuclear now. Pass the Advanced Act on steroids. Small modular reactors in 5 years, not 15. Let red states like Georgia and Texas lead the zero pollution revolution. Point number 3, innovation over taxation. Massive tax credits for carbon capture, geothermal, advanced batteries, but only if the technology is American-made or from friendly countries. No handouts to the Chinese solar panel companies, and big incentives for plastic recycling tech. Point 4, harden the grid and the coast. Bury power lines, upgrade dams, offer federal matching funds for state-level adaptation. No Green New Deal strings attached. Focus on real air and water cleanup, plus trash infrastructure to keep plastics out of our rivers and streams. Point number 5, call the global bluff. If you care so much on climate change, if you're one of those people listening or you know someone that is a big climate change nut, why are they worried about the U.S.? The U.S. is cleaning up its act, and might I add, we're doing it responsibly and effectively. We're not being a Europe, but we're also not being a China and India. If you really care about climate change, go to China and India and tell them to clean up their mess. They are the big contributors to the pollution crisis that is occurring across the globe. That is all we have to do. No wealth redistribution disguised as pollution policy, no war on ranchers, no banning gas stoves, common sense policies. Look, conservatives, we don't have to deny physics to win this debate. We just have to refuse to let the left turn a manageable pollution challenge into a permanent power grab, which would be the Green New Deal. Pollution has always been a part of industrialization. So the next time some MSNBC or DNC, MSDNC as I like to call them, calls you a denier for opposing the Green New Deal, just smile and say, I'm not a denier. I am a doer, and America cleans up pollution better than anyone. So now moving on, we're going to talk about the economic blackout protests that you may have heard about. So let's start with the basics. The economic blackout kicked off as a response to growing frustrations over economic inequality, skyrocketing living costs, corporate greed, and political shifts like the rollback of DEI programs under the Trump administration. This has been organized by groups like the People's Union USA, which is essentially a series of consumer boycotts where people are urged to hit pause on spending for short periods. It was like 24 hours at first, but now they're ramping it up into multi-day events. What is the big idea here? It's to show big corporations like Amazon, Walmart, Target, and even Disney that everyday folks hold the real power by withholding their wallets. So it all began with the warning shot on February 28th, where they encouraged no purchases at major retailers. From there, it snowballed from March 28th, April 18th, October 18th as No King's Days, and a 5-day working strike in September to directly challenge policies seen as favoring the elite, as so they say. Now, as we approach the holidays here on November 21st, the big one is a-brewin'. The mass blackout from November 25th to December 2nd, which happens to be smack middle of Black Friday. Organizers are calling for no work, no shopping at corporate chains, events, and steering clear of private equity-owned spots. What is their goal? Their goal is disrupt profits during the year's biggest shopping frenzy, shining a light on worker exploitation and how the system screws over the average person. It sounds so empowering, right? But here's where it gets stupid, and it gets stupid very quickly. It's laughable, actually. The protest is fundamentally flawed, and it's very likely counterproductive. First off, the economic impact is very minimal at best. These short boycotts, the corporations barely notice because they look at quarterly earnings, not a one-week blip. And any dip gets offset by people stocking up before or splurging after. And it doesn't even do any good for the people that it's supposed to help. Low-wage retail workers lose hours in pay during these strikes. It's not hurting these big corporate American leaders, as they like to say. It's not hurting them one bit. Personally, I think this is a great thing, and the only reason I say that is because this year when I get to go Black Friday shopping, I don't have to deal with a whole bunch of crowds at Walmart, so I'm super excited about that. But it is funny because they're saying the same alleged 7 million people that showed up to the October 18th No Kings protest, they're saying they all better show up and, well, opposite of show up and not support any of these businesses during this time. So I think it's very funny. It's not going to do any damage, and they're being more counterproductive than anything. With that being said, it is time for my favorite part of the show, and that is the cold monologue. For those of you who do not know what the cold monologue is, you ask us questions throughout the week. My editor-in-chief writes them down on pieces of paper. She puts them into this hat. I have no prior knowledge on what's being asked. So with that being said, let's dive into the cold monologue. Through your research, what is one statistic that really stands out to you? Ooh. I would say that one of the statistics that really stands out to me that I think almost on a daily basis is that 24% of Gen Z was aborted. That there would be 24% more of Gen Zers around if it wasn't for abortion. That one really haunts me because that is so many more friendships. That is so many more people that could be with are all around us that are not here because of the evil abortion clinics and all the evil individuals behind abortion. It just really haunts me, and I couldn't believe that number. I had to take a step back and really look it up and do research, but that's very sad, and I anticipate that number is only going to grow under Generation Alpha. I hope that maybe it course corrects and we go and have a much better track record, but Generation Z, 24% of Generation Z is not with us right now because of that, and that really just breaks my heart. It's very sad. So that would be the statistic that most stands out to me right now. Well, folks, that being said, that is all we have in store for today. Join us on Monday as we have another live stream from a different location. We are super excited to welcome you in. Be sure to drop down all your questions and interact with the chat. You get to go off the whim. It's going to be a lot of fun. So I will see you Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Be sure to share your thoughts on X. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at The Martin Memo. And do not forget to subscribe to us on YouTube. Now, in case I don't see you, good morning, good afternoon, and good night. This is The Martin Memo. The Martin Memo.